Welcome to Vantage Points by Ricotta. I'm Michael Evanoff, and I'm joined by my co-host, Cari Guittard.
Today, we're sitting down with Pat Hamilton, the Alliance Director of the I Love You Guys Foundation. The I Love You Guys Foundation is on a mission to retain the joys of youth by providing a standard response protocol to assist with crisis management in schools. Before I Love You Guys, Pat spent 23 years overseeing operations and public education at Adams' 12 five-star schools. It's where he created a positive safety culture for students, teachers, and staff alike.
Pat, it's an honor to have you on the advisory board, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What is the mission of I Love You Guys?
It is to protect the joy of youth. We started this work back in 2006 after John Michael and Ellen Keyes lost their daughter, Emily, at Platte Canyon High School. And it was just a few days after they lost Emily's life that they started the foundation.
Can you tell us a little bit about Emily?
Emily was she was a character and just a go-getter. And her parents, I love the story that John Michael and Ellen tell about their daughter. So she came downstairs when she was a young teen and had basically created her own brand. She had made this drawing and she said, well, anyone who's going to change the world needs to have a brand. I think that just speaks to, she knew that she was going to be a powerhouse and a force of nature, and she absolutely is.
Oh, fantastic.
So what was her parents' vision in starting I Love You Guys?
The first couple of years, I think they were doing a lot of research and trying to figure out exactly what their response was going to be. They were doing work in the community. They had Emily's Parade. They were doing those kinds of things, kind of experimented in that fundraising stuff. Turns out we weren't very good at like gold, silver, and bronze sponsorship. And then their mission started to change. They were doing a lot of research on school safety. And they found this missing piece of the puzzle for school safety, and it was all around communication. And that's when it became apparent to them that they could make a difference. And it was around, let's create terms that are, or a common lexicon that can be used not only by schools, but by first responders, and get everyone on the same page. It was a big deal, because at the time, and I was in public education at the time, we were using code language. So it was like, lockdown could be code red, it could be lockdown level 4, it could be Bart Simpson's in the building. It was all over the map, and that could be within the same school district. You could have a high school on one end of town using code red, and a high school on the other end of the town using lockdown level 4, all being served by the same law enforcement agency. Imagine the confusion that was being created there. And so They knew that if they could get their arms around that and create this common lexicon, that they could make a difference. And that's what they've done.
How personal has this been for you, your journey with I Love You Guys?
Much more personal than I expected. So John Michael's sister, Heidi, she and I worked together at the time when Emily lost her life. So she was a sergeant for Broomfield Police Department at the time, and so we worked together a lot. I was director of security. She was over part of our SRO program. So the SROs that were in Broomfield that served those schools, she was their supervisor. And we were sitting in a FEMA training in December, just a few months after Emily had lost her life. And we decided that we were going to figure out a better way to do this. And so she and I worked with Broomfield County Emergency Management, and some other SWAT people were involved with this, and it was an 18-month project. The result of that was a video that came out at the time. It was a DVD, that's how long ago this was, back in 2008. Wow. And it had a classroom discussion guide, so we started showing that video to our teachers and to our students. And the discussion guide was for the teachers to use and to have a conversation with students, because we weren't talking about students and empowering students about why do we do these drills and why is it important for you to be safe. And at the time we had 4 responses. It was lock down, lock out, shelter and evacuate. She showed that to her brother. It's exactly what they were kind of looking for when they wanted to create this common terminology that we could use. And that's when it happened. And then I've worked closely with the family now since 2009. I was on their board of directors before I became a member of the foundation as a staff member.
There's so much about your work that we're inspired by, and crisis is happening at all times to varying degrees. And how we engage with crisis really makes all the difference.
The standard response protocol it's an all hazards approach, and so we have to have terms and methods to deal with those other crises. And so hold is one that we use where it's just, hey, we're going to stay in our classrooms. There's something going on in the hallway. We need to deal with that situation. It could be a dysregulated student, and let's deal with that student. Let's give that student the space that they need, and then we'll come out into the hallways and have our normal day. We can have passing periods. We can go to music class, we can go to art class and things like that. We talked to a school district in the Pacific Northwest, and they've had 2 situations this year where they've had a moose on their playground. So there was a moose on the loose. And so they needed to have secure. The protocol is we're gonna bring everyone inside, we're gonna lock the doors. Inside the school is business as usual. Teachers are gonna teach, our learners are gonna learn, but there's a moose on the playground. So there's a moose on the loose, so we need to have secure. Having law enforcement there for your lockdown drills, which by the way, there's no trauma or no drama in a drill, we're just learning muscle memory, but it also gets those officers into your facility so they can learn it. They know where hallway A is. They know where classroom B105 is. That's a game changer as well. So, evacuation, we've been doing that for decades in the United States and all over the world. That's fire. We all started with fire drills. All of us had those in schools. And shelter, Mother Nature's always going to throw something at us that we need to shelter for. All of these things that we do now, it's all as a result of I'll brag a little bit and say standard response protocol is a component of that. Because to do this work, we have to have conversations with our community and our first responders. There's a component of this that is very much supported by technology and AI. What AI is going to do is shift. Technology was something that we used in the response part of this, and now it's going to become proactive. So if you think about your school or your community or your commercial, even commercial facilities, right? If you think about this as concentric circles, and we can start from this outermost circle, and if we can identify a threat long before it even approaches the front door,
absolutely,
and we can initiate a protocol, it's a game changer.
Yeah. No, the line delineation and person of interest is an amazing tool to be utilized, especially if you have known people that you don't want on your campus. Even before they hit the door, the cameras will recognize them and alert you immediately. And that's what it is. It's proactive visual intelligence.
That speed of response, that will save lives. What AI is going to do for us is get us better at the things that are left of the incident. But there's also a whole component of this that is the culture and climate of your school. It's behavioral threat assessment. It's all of these other things that really come down to the behaviors of the student. If I went to a high school today and I ask a teacher, tell me where the bullying is occurring in your schools, tell me where the kids are vaping, they know. It's like, oh yeah, there's this one spot under the stairwell where we don't have a camera or we don't have a vape sensor or whatever that is, and that's where the kids vape. And what happens there? Well, when they're done vaping, they maybe sometimes give each other, there's some bullying happening there as well. All of those things are components into this continuum of school safety. That all of that gets you to a culture of school safety. When you start to have a culture of school safety or a culture of safety in your community, that's going to be a big pivot for us. We do talk about how this is not just things that we need to be talking to our teachers about. In the case of Arapahoe High School, the custodian was outside doing some work, and he saw the gunman approaching, the assailant approaching the school, saw the gun. He gets on his radio and he's lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. He's saying this over and over again. By all accounts, that school was in lockdown in less than 60 seconds. So unfortunately, we still lost 2 lives. We lost an innocent life there, and Claire Davis, and we also lost the life of the assailant himself. But it was that custodian who knew the protocol, who had been trained, and he knew what to do in that moment. He just used a simple 2-way radio to call for that. It was long before that a lot of the technology that we have was available, but that saved lives. We know that when we take fast action and quick action, we get people behind a locked door, that lives will be saved.
How does technology, Pat, help support and enable lockdown quickly in these schools?
It's really changing the speed of our response. And we know from that data that these things are over, 70% in 5 minutes, 90% in 10 minutes. So every second counts. And so the technology that we're bringing into the space, our response is going to be much, much faster than it ever has been. We talked about Arapahoe High School earlier and how that school was locked down in 60 seconds. But that still required some actions by the people inside the building. They had to get kids out of the hallways into classrooms, they had to lock doors, and they had to turn off lights and get out of sight. So when we say lockdown, it's locks, lights, out of sight. Lockdown, locks, lights, out of sight. If what we're seeing with technology now is that one is 30 years ago, 25 years ago, even current state right now for a lot of schools, is someone has to go outside of the classroom door, put a key in that door and lock it, and then close it. We've seen and had all kinds of hacks. We had magnets on the doors. We had little things that would hold the door open, and that was designed so we could keep the door locked during instructional time, but not have a student knocking on the door constantly as you're coming in and out. So what we're seeing now is a lot of technology and things that are just very basic technology. A push button lock on the inside of the classroom was the next thing. So we could have the door unlocked, students could come in and out of the classroom for bathroom breaks, whatever, without disruption of the educational environment, and then a teacher or student could still push the button and lock it. Now what we're seeing is electronic door locks. And so the locks and all of this is integrated. It's fascinating, the integration and how this works. But the locks themselves are electronic. And so when you are initiating, it could be a phone, it could be a button on the wall, it could be a call. When that lockdown gets initiated, the doors throughout the facility lock.
Yeah.
So there's not this moment of, did I lock my classroom door? And now the other thing that we're seeing too is there's like LED lights on that lock that are flashing to indicate to the teacher that's in the safe space with their students out of sight, right, with the lights out, that door is in a locked status as well. So that's immediate. We don't have to worry about someone putting their own lives at risk to try to go out into a hallway and lock a door with a brass key. By the way, that is almost impossible to do. We shot a video years ago in Adams 12, and all we did was turn on a video camera to one of our admin people and said, hey, I need you to lock this door. And that was enough of emotional stress to start to impact motor skills. So we know that we lose fine motor skills. Law enforcement partners tell us that you lose those fine motor skills. So to take all that out of the equation and just have all the doors lock when we need them to lock through the push of a button. And then you're going to have certain doors that our tactical teams need to have unlocked. Those unlock because maybe they're in a locked state. That response and that technology is going to help our first responders do their jobs. It's going to help us get students behind a locked door. We know that that's a life-saving tactic. So yeah, it's going to be a thing that I hope goes across the country rapidly. Takes money, but we'll get there. School districts, parents, when it's a bond initiative, and I lived through bond initiatives where we would pass bonds so we could build schools and improve schools, parents will vote for things that are safety features. Absolutely. If it's going to keep our kids safe, remember, I expect safety, my child to be safe, and I expect them to get an education in that order. So if you ask for those things in that order with your bond or your mill levy overrides that you have to do in public education, probably going to say yes.
So Pat, how do we know that locked doors are saving lives?
So we, again, we're avid students, and this is certainly a space that we've done a lot of research. So Sandy Hook Commission, that report, their number one recommendation was to get behind a locked door. And that was because they found no evidence and no cases where once a student or staff member was behind a locked door, that there was a loss of life. We took that a little bit further and started digging, and we found 3 instances where someone had lost their life once they were behind a locked door. Now, the first one of those was Red Lake, Minnesota. And in that case, there was a window next to the door. That's how they entered the classroom. But they were shooting at that lock, and that lock did not fail. The lock worked. In Parkland, we know that students weren't out of sight. And so the assailant in that situation was targeting people that they could see through the window. But again, the locked door held. And then the last instance was Emily. And in this case, the assailant was already behind and in that classroom before the door was locked. And that took 1,100 grains of explosives from the Jeffco SWAT team to blow that door off the hinges to get in there and access that situation. So we know that our locked doors work. Doors in schools are fire-rated doors. They're solid wood core. There's a steel frame door jamb around those with industrial strength locks. That is proven technology that it works, and that's why we tell people, like, the number one thing is get behind that locked door. Locks, lights, out of sight. It's in that order. Locks, lights. Usually the light switch is right by the door anyway, so we're going to lock the door, turn the lights off, get out of sight. if you have a few seconds, if you have 20 seconds, grab as many kids as you can out of that hallway, bring them in, get them in that safe space. And then once that door's locked, it has to stay locked until law enforcement comes to release that lockdown. That is a key thing. We don't just release these over the intercom system. We've got to have law enforcement in the facility. Even if it's a false alarm, and we've had those, we would have law enforcement partners come and release those locks. But we know getting behind a locked door is the best place to be in that situation. Obviously, if you are 10 feet from an exit and you can just evacuate. But if your option is to get behind a locked door, let's do that.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
We work in crisis, so we're used to it at this point, and we're able to manage that. But for a young person, this can be an anxiety-inducing experience, just going through an active shooter drill. Even with my kids, I have an 11 and 8-year-old. And so I appreciate your approach in that you have very simple ways that whether you're 8 or 11 years old or an adult who's not used to being in a crisis environment can feel empowered. So if you had 5 minutes, can you get yourself ready to do what you need to do next?
We say in our training that we're not experts, but we're avid students. And so we were talking to a school district and they were talking about the power of 5 minutes. And the reality is that the people in the school, that staff, it could be the kitchen staff, it could be the teacher, whoever's in the hallway, they're going to own the first 5 minutes of any crisis. Well, it just so happens that we can also train the SRP in a matter of probably 2 5-minute conversations. These are the 5 actions. This is what you are supposed to do in that particular action or that protocol. And you can spend 5 minutes going over those, and then you can spend an additional 5 minutes going over lockdown, because that one's very serious, and we want to make sure that our teachers understand that. But we have all of these resources available online at no cost, not even an email. You can just click download. So there's classroom posters in 20 different languages. So an administrator could walk into that classroom where the poster is, hopefully, and just say, okay, teacher, let's spend a moment. Let's run through those 5 actions real quick and make sure that you understand those. The response that we get typically when we have those conversations with our educators is, I can do this.
No, absolutely.
It's making a difference. We're seeing it. We see it. We talk to law enforcement and our educators all the time. And it's great. I'll tell you, it's interesting. I walk through the airport with this shirt on, and it's surprising sometimes to have people say, love your program. We use your program. And it's not just schools, but houses of worship, higher education, hospitals. It's starting to really become a community program.
Pat, share with us a little bit about how you approach reunification.
So we have the standard reunification method, the SRM, and that is a space where schools are doing a really good job of implementing the standard response protocol, but reunification is something that a lot of schools are still trying to figure this out. And it's just a process of reunifying students with their parents. We have to have an exchange of custody. So school districts, we're in custody of those children during the school day. Mm-hmm. And at the end of the school day, we do this every day across the country. We have a reunification, but it looks different when it's just a normal day. It's like we're going to ring the bell, students get on the bus, our walkers walk home, the parents pick them up. But if there's a disruption to that school day, and this is something especially for our younger students, if there's a disruption of that school day and we have to end the day early, we need to have an exchange of custody where we are tracking and accounting for those students. And that's what the reunification method is. But it's a process of having parents filling out cards, checking their ID to make sure that what they put on the card is accurate, making sure that they're an authorized person that can pick the student up, and then there's an exchange between a reunifier, which is someone who goes into a student environment, gets that student, comes back out. As we're bringing the student out, we ask, hey, do you feel comfortable going home with your mom today? Yes, I do. There are some tricks to the trade. We want to have, line of sight's very important. We don't necessarily want to have students arriving and a line of parents right here where they can see each other. As soon as that happens, it's over. Yeah. So we have to, there's some techniques to it. Again, it's all available at our website. There's books, you can download our manuals, all the things, all the materials that you need to do that. It's all no cost.
There's comfort in containing that process. And you've shared with us before about it's a constant balance of sharing too much information and being transparent, and then being able to tailor the conversation, whether you're speaking to, a student, even a younger student, versus a parent or another community member. So how do you balance that sharing of information?
That was part of the initial, that 18-month video project that John Michael's sister and I worked on. Was we needed to, our students weren't taking our drills very seriously, and they certainly didn't know about, and we were still trying to figure out reunification back then too. But what we discovered at that point is we have to tell students why we're doing this. It's not a secret. And so we created this training that's all ages and all ages appropriate. Now, we give our middle school and high school students a lot more detail than we give our kindergartners. But again, we also have training materials that are specific for younger students. Now, in our district, this is another thing to think about too. And when we had drills, for our younger students, we were giving them lockdown lollipops. Now, my nutrition services folks didn't necessarily love that because I was giving them sugar. My teachers sometimes didn't love that. It was funny, is once our other teachers, all the way up to the high school level, learned about lockdown lollipops, then every classroom now had lockdown lollipops. So they all wanted lockdown lollipops. But you can have these conversations with students, and you can talk about reunification, like this is what we're going to do if we ever have to evacuate the school. And by the way, reunification is not just because of active assailants. I did 30 in my career, real reunifications. Gas leaks, water main breaks, power outages, all these things were things that contributed to the need for reunification. I mean, I had other stuff too. We had drive-by shootings, we had attempted kidnappings, all these kinds of things that led to that, where we just needed to have a very safe exchange of students and parents where we couldn't just ring the bell. But we needed to let our students know too that we have a process for this. We tell our parents we have a process for this.
And you've shared that it's never perfect.
Oh, it's never.
It's never perfect.
No, I've done 30 and never had a perfect reunification in my life. I've had 30 successful reunifications, but never a perfect one. Always room for improvement. One of my stories I love to tell is one of my last reunifications I was doing for Adams 12, where I worked. There was a person that was in line, second in line, and this person had one of our reunification cards, and he said, I'm explaining we have a process for this, we're prepared, we're just moving students around, just a couple of quick movements inside the school to get students where we want them to be. And the person's like, you don't have a process for this. And I looked at him and I said, well, we didn't just print those cards just now. And the two mama bears behind him, they took over for me. And I just kind of did the thing where you just kind of step back. Yeah. They made sure that he was very aware that we had a process. But so that goes to the power of communication for not only your students, letting them know that we have a process, but letting your parents know as well. It takes time. It's going to be slow, but we're doing this for a reason. We want to make sure that your students are safe and that we have that exchange of custody and that we're accounting for those students in a time that's not our normal school day. Whatever has put us into this crisis, we need to address that. We need to address the student safety, and then we need to get them back with their parents. If the faster we can do that, the sooner recovery can start. We say that recovery starts long before the crisis ever begins. If you are not preparing for all of these things before the crisis ever begins, your recovery is going to be extended months.
And one of the simple preparation pieces that is just fantastic is you share with everyone that we all need to be working on situational awareness, and to take that 15 seconds, and I do it multiple times a day, to just sort of lock in, where am I at, kind of dial in my senses, be aware. And that's part of working in the space that we work in. But to teach that, can you share a little bit about how you teach situational awareness? So again, it's another simple layer of empowerment, not just for the kids, but for the parents, the teachers. It's something that I think everybody needs to be really paying attention to.
Yeah, it comes down to really, there's just a few questions that you can ask yourself. What's going on around me? Where am I? And what's available to me? I mean, those are kind of those things that really keys in on situational awareness. But we walk through our daily lives and we don't necessarily think about that. How many people, when you're getting on the airplane, count the rows? Do you tap the rows to say, okay, I'm 7 rows from the exit this way? Or even just look around. Yeah. Or if you are in a large meeting space, are you looking at the exits? Where's that AED? Knowing those kinds of things will help improve your response and can save lives. That's what situational awareness is to us. It's just that. And being able to process that. If we go through our lives thinking about our own safety and the safety of others, that's going to just naturally create those moments of situational awareness.
Pat, I'm curious. I Love You Guys Foundation. How many states have adopted your foundation protocols?
So we have 10 program adopters now, and I feel like we're in conversations a lot of times there's always other states talking about this, and then we have 3 that are practitioners, and so there's a difference there. Program adopters have officially adopted our curriculum and our training program. They get co-branded materials.
As a gold standard. Yeah.
Yep, and as part of that adoption, we go out and do training for that state, and then our practitioners are states that are they're not quite ready to maybe sign the dotted line and have those co-branded materials, but we find ourselves in the state a lot. We're in Illinois right now, and Illinois is one of our newest program adopters. 10 now. I would love that to be
absolutely
35 or 40.
Yeah.
If you were to wave a wand and have anyone at the table that's not there now to have an alliance with, who would that be?
Oh man, that is a great question, and one that you surprised me with. I would love to see this program really start to take place in other parts of the world. And so I think I would have security leaders from different countries all over the world, because we do see these, it's becoming more of a news story now that we have these situations occurring not just within the United States. This is a global thing.
Europe.
And
Absolutely.
it's all hazards. So it's not something that's just a U.S. thing. I would love to see leaders from, and we were fortunate to train in Dubai a year ago in May, and we trained with an organization that helps develop and run schools in third world countries. And it was a really fascinating experience for us, because we learned a lot about how our protocols work and don't work in facilities. Maybe it's literally just a building that's 4 walls and that's it. But I would love to be having these conversations with world leaders and talking about how we can do this. Again, these are not just school lessons, these are life lessons. And I think that would be a wonderful thing. Long-term goal for me, I would love to have the standard response protocol be 4 actions instead of 5. I would love for lockdown to no longer be something that we talk about anywhere, and that we're just talking about, hey, this hold in our classroom because those things happen, secure because things happen outside of our buildings, evacuate and shelter. You know, Mother Nature is always going to throw something at us that we need to shelter for, and to not have lockdown, that's a dream.
Yeah.
I would love that.
Absolutely.
I don't think any of us ever thought that this was going to be the path, that it was going to be so much, that Emily's voice was going to give us this voice and this path, and to make this much difference in the world. And man, has her voice done that. It's remarkable.
You've honored her legacy, and it just matters so much that this curriculum is living and it's growing and iterating. So it's not something that's static, and it's incredibly powerful. So
she was a force of nature, is what John Michael and Ellen say about her. She was a force of nature, and man, that is, you see it. You walk into a place and you see a random place, you see an SRP poster, standard response protocol poster behind a desk. It's a goosebump moment.
Sure, absolutely. Listen, thank you so much. I mean, an amazing, amazing story that you've done, and the legacy that you carry on. Thank you, Patrick. Really appreciate it.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you all for the time.
Cari, I think what we heard from Pat today basically is technology is a key enabler in protecting schools and school students.
I was struck by how much work they've done to really study these issues and do it right, and then keep iterating and learning from best practices across the country and even globally now. We don't have enough schools doing this. And then the other thing that really struck me is that this is not just about school safety, it's about the entire community coming together, and coming together before a crisis. And that's just critically important for all of us, that we're all responsible in this, and we all need to be engaged with our kids, not just our kids taking, the drills at school, but us as parents being active participants in that, and then practicing some of the very basics that he underscored from the 5 minutes. We all can prepare for that 5 minutes that we own in a crisis, and then taking those 15-second, situational awareness breaks, which we do all the time, but now I'm doubling down to teach my kids and my kids' friends, because it is something that's important for them to not only take stock of just at multiple times during the day, but when they stop and pay attention, to ask those 3 questions, to dial into their senses and go, what am I noticing?
No, I totally agree with you. I think being proactive in not only identifying the threat before it happens, but also be proactive in understanding and working with the people to protect.